Hi, my name is Howard Durstepanian. I work in project controls here at AMEC. We're here today to discuss the Engineering Leads training program and specifically the module that covers the topic of engineering management. The purpose for the presentation arose when we found that the expectations that were being placed on project discipline leads did not necessarily align with the training and direction that had been provided to the leads by more senior levels of management. Our approach in developing the presentation was to start at a very high level, and that is to discuss why we have to manage the work in the first place. The next tier was to discuss and explain some of the base knowledge or toolbox items, if you will, that would be required by the engineering leads in order for them to successfully execute their work. And the third tier is the most detailed level, where we explained in detail some of the concepts, some of the procedures that they would need to follow in order to have success in performance of their duties. The first area we addressed with the group is why AMEC needs to manage the work. And we talk in terms of four basic blocks, if you will, starting with our corporate vault, or otherwise known as our corporate experience in executing projects. We then move on and discuss our ability to estimate the projects and the man-hours associated with the engineering work. We then discuss successful execution of the projects, and then that is followed by the fourth block, which is a review of the performance of the project so that we can take the lessons learned and store them in our corporate vault or experience base. We then discuss the results we expect as we go through those four steps, and the four basic results that we look for are a full order book for AMEC. We look for healthy margins in execution of the work. One of the results from the healthy margins would be a motivated and incentivized workforce, because there is a steady flow of work for the people. And then at the end, this will result in three major outputs: engineering excellence for AMEC, a high share price for AMEC, and probably most importantly, happy customers who in the future will either award us additional work or ask us to bid on additional work. The second major area we address in the presentation is the tools and basic knowledge or toolbox items that will be required by the engineering leads in order to successfully execute their work. The first area that we address with them is a standardized engineering man-hour estimating template. This will need to be adjusted in your office to reflect the estimating tools that are used when it comes to developing man-hour estimates for engineering work. The second part that we address with them is the Convero system, which is AMEC's proprietary project management system. One of the points we make about Convero, because many at AMEC are not aware of, is that the Convero system is a proprietary system that is owned, developed, managed, and maintained by AMEC. Oftentimes we run across people who think that Convero is a third-party piece of software and that we need to go outside for issues like support and training. That is not the case, and we've found that that is a very good point to make with the engineering leads. The next area we discuss is the area that we refer to as key terms. These are terms that the engineers will need to be familiar with and have a command of in order to understand their work and effectively manage their work. The first key term that we address is the coding structure that is used to budget man-hours for the engineering work and control the man-hours through the change management process. The second of the key terms that we discuss have to do with the work packages that are developed. They are discrete packages of work for the engineers so that they can effectively manage their work and the associated deliverables. The third area we touch on is document numbering, and that is to illustrate to the engineers that there are such things as corporate document numbering systems. We discuss what the various numbering systems are, where they can find the documentation associated with document numbering. The fourth area addressed is construction work packages, or as they're commonly known in our industry, CWPs. The reason for the focus on the CWP is to underline to the engineering community that the CWP and any schedule changes associated with it can dramatically affect the schedule of their engineering work and when the deliverables are actually due, and we can assess with them the impacts that changes to CWPs can have on their engineering work. The next step or phase of the presentation is to take the engineers down into the details of some of the things that they're going to be asked to do in a management capacity. The first of these areas that we address is what we call deliverables planning. One of the key areas we find that we need to address with the engineers is the difference between two basic types of engineering activities. There are activities that we call level of effort activities, and we give them examples such as supervision and management, attend review meetings, and similar activities. The aspect of these activities that we'd like to point out to the engineers are work associated with these activities do not typically directly result in the production of deliverables to the customer, and typically in these types of activities, manual progress is taken. The second type of activities that we like to address are what we call deliverable-based activities. These are activities that directly result in the production of deliverables, where typically milestone progress is used to measure the progress of the work. The next area of detail we cover is timesheet management. We like to underscore to the engineering community the importance of timely and accurate recording of hours worked on a project, as these hours, as we show in subsequent slides, can dramatically affect things like earned hour calculations and productivity factor calculations. We also go into some detail about the pros and cons of using overtime on a project. We address the overtime subject with the engineering leads so that they have a better idea of the impacts and benefits of using versus not using overtime on the various projects on which they're working. There are detailed graphics in the presentation that explain to the engineers exactly how progress is calculated on their engineering work. We provide examples of milestone progress across several deliverables and basically clearly demonstrate to the engineers the math required and the math calculations that are used in calculating progress and rolling it up to summary levels. We find that this goes a long way in helping the engineers understand where the numbers are coming from that they read on reports. The next area we touch on is calculation of productivity factor. Once again, we use detailed graphics within the presentation to illustrate to the engineers how the productivity factor is calculated based on the various inputs such as actual man hours, progress to date, and so on. This again serves to familiarize the engineering community with the details associated with the calculation on essentially how they're going to be measured in terms of engineering performance. Finally, the last area we touch on, which goes hand in hand with the CWP that we spoke of earlier, is the resource management issue. And again, through very detailed graphics, we demonstrate to the engineers how they can come to work on Monday and their staffing curve is a straight line depicting 1.5 full-time equivalents required to complete the work. We then add some variables into the equation and demonstrate to them how that initial requirement of 1.5 full-time equivalents can grow to as many as 4 full-time equivalents required based on changes to schedule and some minor changes to scope. In our summary of the presentation, we like to enforce key concepts discussed during the presentation in addition to talking about how they will benefit the engineers. The critical concepts that we reinforce in the summary consist of how the estimate will form the baseline of the engineering work, how the deliverables planning will be critical to the success of the project, the importance of correctly capturing actual hours worked on the project, how the progress and productivity is measured so there's a solid understanding in that area, and finally, in terms of the critical concepts, how productivity, scope, and interfaces can impact the resource requirements on the project. We then reinforce that these elements are important to our leads because they must continuously undertake performance and resource analysis in order to give themselves the best chance of delivering them on time and on budget. In our closing bullets, we reinforce with the leads that they should always feel free to ask questions, particularly when it comes to issues around project controls, and we strongly reinforce that engineering and project controls must function as a team in order for us to have the most success. We reinforce and encourage the leads to seek support from their corporate discipline manager as required, and we also strongly encourage them to be familiar with the corporate resources around them, such as ADL, or as it's known, the AMEC Document Library. And in closing, we use a little phrase that we've developed here called don't know versus don't like. And it goes like this: we don't mind losing sleep because we don't like where we are, but we do not enjoy losing sleep because we don't know where we are.